We're going live. We're going live. We're going live. What's up, guys? Yo, it's Tyler with Hooksets Are Free. Got a giant glass of bourbon here, and I mean giant. It is 9:05 p.m. here on Friday, March the 4th. The Bassmaster Classic is underway. That is not really what we're going to talk about tonight. However, we are going to talk bass fishing, and that is for sure. The topic of tonight's stream is what I think are probably my top 5 lures for early spring bass fishing, specifically when the water is cold. Now, keep in mind that conditions will vary across the country. So if you're down south, it's a totally different ballgame. It is already the middle of pre-spawn and bordering on the spawn. So that is a different situation altogether. If you're up north, or you're a little bit in the Midwest, even me in Colorado, you are still iced over. And looking forward to when the ice thaws and you have the opportunity to go fishing when the water is cold. And I'm talking about high 30s into the 40s prior to getting in the 50s. So that is what we're going to talk about tonight. We got a couple people already in the chat. What's up, Daniel? How you doing? Adam Odin, yo yo. Abe, cool granddaddy, sweets forever. How you doing, brother? Losing big fish in the house, and Bass's chap, Ron Holly in the house. What is up, guys? I'm gonna give people just a couple minutes to get in here, and I'm gonna take the first of what will be many sips on this giant double or triple pour of Stellum single barrel rye. This is the end of the bottle, so I didn't think it would quite be this big, but we got time. So spicy and delicious. Put a couple cubes in that, which have already melted in the last 10 minutes. So Daniel says he's going to join. Well, cheers, man. It is Friday night after all, right? Why not? Losing Big Fish says, I got to fish open water today. It was super muddy out at Stan Lake. Well, good for you for being able to fish open water. I'll tell you guys a little bit about what I'm working with here in Colorado and just tell you that we had a very, very warm week here, really in the 60s every single day. So the lows were in the 30s, the highs were in the 60s. I think we pushed 70 degrees one day. And so the pond in my local neighborhood, which if you guys have been following me for a while, you'll know that it does not have any bass, bluegill, any, really cool species of fish to catch, but rather just goldfish that are absolutely oversized, gigantic. I don't know if that was an accident or on purpose, uh, potentially to, remove some of the vegetation or the weeds or whatever else is in our pond. But that body of water, if I had to guess, is probably only 5 feet deep in the center, maybe a little bit deeper. And it has been frozen all winter and it thawed out completely as of today. So that's a good sign. However, we are going to get some snow, I think tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. It's currently 46 degrees, but it's going to cool back down pretty significantly. So that's a little bit of what I have to deal with here in Colorado is that, it's early March. It's not truly springtime. It is still the end of winter. So I did not expect to go fishing at this point, and really don't expect to be able to legitimately fish for another 3 weeks or so. But you never know. Fingers crossed that might be able to get out on the earlier side this season. But regardless, what we are going to talk about tonight was a suggestion by Matt or Matthew Acevedo or South Jersey Fisherman 028. I don't think he's in here right now. It's possible that he will hop in as and when he sees that we're live if he's available tonight. But he told me a couple nights ago when I told him that I was going to go live. I also told Ron I was going to go live and did not make it on Wednesday night simply because my 3-year-old daughter was struggling to fall asleep. And you guys have realized that that's something that I deal with on a somewhat frequent basis. So hopefully we have no interruptions tonight. But that kept me away from being on the last couple nights. But I'm on here now, and we're going to talk about my top 5 bass fishing lures, or techniques rather, for fishing in early spring. This is really before the pre-spawn kicks in. So when water is still super cold, um, kind of in the high 30s and all through the 40s. So these are techniques that are still going to prioritize using search baits to find active feeding fish, but not yet fish that are um, really aggressive quite yet. So these are mostly reaction bites, and we'll break it down in just a couple minutes. So let me catch up on these comments. Robin says ice is still on our lakes in Michigan. Yeah, I hear you for sure. Midwest Fisherman says, "Hey Tyler, I quit Instagram, so it's great keeping up with you on YouTube." Well, I kind of did too. I didn't quit, but I haven't posted there in like 3 months. So I hear you, man. There's just something about Instagram and what it has become that doesn't quite fit my style, and generally can be a little bit toxic. I found that Instagram's algorithm just switched entirely. So it changes the content that you are exposed to, it changes the content that the platform wants you to create. And I'm not all that jazzed about it. So I've stayed away myself for the last little while. I will probably make my way back on there, but it's just a matter of time. So, losing big fish at Stanley Lake. Dude, are you here in Denver? Midwest Fisherman says Chicago forecast is to hit 66 degrees tomorrow. Still thin ice on our inland waters. Yeah, I hear you. I'm probably right about in the same spot as you in um in being on the verge, but you never know. If we get a cold front, if we get a really hard cold snap where we've got a week straight of cold temperatures, things are going to ice back over. And if it turns around and gets warm for a while, we might be fishing sooner than later. So that's all good news. Losing Big Fish is in Denver and says he fished Stanley Lake. That's awesome. I did not know that a body of water quite that big would be available to fish quite yet. So, um, right on, man. That's exciting. Maybe we should plan on getting out together um, a couple times this season, dude. Now, you know that I'm down south in Parker, so I can make my way up to Stanley Lake from time to time, but I've got a couple of places that might be worth us meeting up at, and I'm sure that you do as well. So, yeah, it's just a matter of finding the time since you're about 45 minutes north of me. But Colby Andrews, what's up, dude? No, you're the best. I appreciate you loving the vids. If you're being honest, I don't know if you're joking or what. Ron says we never got over freezing today in Rhode Island, at least where he's at. Dang. Matthew Acevedo in the house, South Jersey fisherman. If you guys haven't already checked out Matt's new YouTube channel, which is why he looks like South Jersey Fisherman 028 instead of Matthew Acevedo, you need to go check out his YouTube channel. It's brand new. He's released a couple of videos, couple live streams, and they are good. His first one was an interview with a bait maker, and his second one was a live unboxing of a lot of different JDM lures and just generally discussing the topic of whether JDM lures are worth it or not. And it was a great conversation. He broke down a million different baits, and I really liked that video. So keep it up, Matt. I look forward to seeing what else you put out, man. Daniel says, got my tackle warehouse order in today. Got the Arid X for that rod to put the custom black on. And a Dobbin 734C. Hoping to test them on the water tomorrow. Sweet, dude. That sounds awesome. Let me know how you like those reels, because I'll tell you what, I've got that custom black. I've got two of them and really, really like them. Um, And I think you're gonna like that other reel as well, dude. That Abu Garcia Roxani is smooth as butter. So hope you enjoy, man. Colby says he's being serious. Been wanting to get into a fishing club and start going into competitions. Right on, man. That sounds awesome. And Adam, yeah, I don't know if I would say the king of swim baits, but yes, Matt is the one that I had on, a month or two ago to talk about this bait right here. And this is actually a knockoff of the bait that we talked about specifically, but this is a KO of the DRT Tiny Clash. And yes, Matthew is a passionate swim bait fisherman, as well as just JDM in general. So very knowledgeable guy, and very active in the chat. So yes, sir, that is him. Robin, that is a good question, because this was actually a gift for my birthday just last month from my brother. I could probably find out that information for you, but it's pretty sweet, isn't it? It's got this offset bottom, really cool glass. So unfortunately, I don't remember who makes it, but I can find that out for you and let you know on a future stream for sure. And Matt says he's got a live this Sunday at 8:30. Gonna do an unboxing of Epic Eric's Professor Pack. Sweet. I will do my best to make it on Sunday night, but you know that if I don't, I will watch it on the replay. So keep it up, man. Robin, I will find out for you. I'm sorry. If had I purchased them, I would know what they are for sure. But my family, my brother and my dad and I are all pretty passionate about whiskey, and bourbon in particular. And so we've been playing around with different styles of glasses for the last year or two, and are narrowing in on a couple that we really like. This actually is not necessarily one of them, although I do like the square shape, the offset bottom, and just how heavy this thing is. I mean, it probably weighs a pound by itself. So it comes in a 2-pack. Maybe I can track down the box, or I can certainly ask my brother and get an answer to you pretty quickly. If you want to send me an email, just as a reminder, and I can get back to you quicker, my email address is hooksetsarethree18@gmail.com. But let's get into it, guys. Tonight we're going to talk about the top 5 early spring bass fishing lures for when the water is still cold. So this is going to be different content, different lures than you will hear about when we talk about top 5 spring fishing lures or pre-spawn baits. So this is specifically when the water is cold, high 30s and all through the 40s, really kind of leading up to when the pre-spawn bite gets hot. So you guys will probably know a few of these baits for sure. I mean, in fact, you'll know about all of them, of course, but you might not expect me to mention these 5 specifically. And I am going to branch out just a little bit, mention kind of similar categories, but I do have kind of a primary top 5, and we're going to start with that, okay? So, number 1 on my list is the lipless crankbait. And these are not necessarily in a particular order. It's not like I think that the lipless crankbait reigns king in the spring. But the main thing to note is that the lipless crankbait is great for fishing in a lot of different ways. And this bait in particular, the Lucky Craft LV500, is awesome for fishing deep. So early, when the water is cold, fish are still going to be hunkered down and close to their winter haunts. They will just start to feed and start moving around. They're not quite making their move up shallow to where they're going to start heading to drop offs and then to the back of bays, etc., where they're going to go spawn eventually. That's not going to happen until the late 40s or early 50s in terms of water temperature. So the lipless crankbait can be fished a bunch of different ways. And like I said, that lipless crankbait is going to be one that I'm going to use all throughout the spring. So one thing you're going to see as a common thread in all of these baits that I mentioned is the forage that they are meant to imitate. This is a time of year where I think bass are feeding on minnows and shad primarily, or the equivalent to that in your bodies of water. It's not until just a little bit later that they're probably going to start chasing and munching on bluegills and gizzard shad and much bigger meals. Although once you get into, say, mid 40s, they will eat bigger baits. But I think a bluegill really comes into play as we get closer to the spawn. So you're going to notice a lot of shad patterns in the early spring. And then as we start to get into the pre-spawn, then I'll start working my reds in a little bit more. But there is still a window of time in the early spring where I will throw a red. And when I think that the fish are feeding on crawfish, or where the water temp is just the water clarity is really dirty. Okay, so those things make a big difference. Colby says, this is good. I'm from Maine. I can't wait to get out and fish. Well, right on. Ron Hawley, Bassless Chap, is in Rhode Island. So same boat as you, man. So you guys being in the mid 40s, you might want to kind of bridge the gap of what we're talking about here today. But really all of this content still applies. So the lipless crankbait is a pretty wide category. As I said, I will throw it all through the spring. So early on, I will throw that heavier lipless crankbait out deeper and slowly work it. A bait like the LV500 or the Jackal TN70 that is very heavy in nature. The LV500 is a 3/4 ounce bait. This guy right here. And the Jackal TN70 is a 5/8 ounce bait. Both of these are great for fishing close to the bottom. So what I will do is bomb that thing out there as far and as deep as I can. Let it fall all the way to the bottom. And that thing will rest on bottom, nose down, tail up. I'm not going to kill it for too long. Once I know it hits bottom, I'm going to start that retrieve. And instead of a straight reel, all I'm going to do is pull up, probably from, 7 o'clock up to 11, roughly. Okay, so just a pull up and then let it down, reel up the slack. So it's just going to flutter up a couple feet and fall back down to bottom. It's just a slow and methodical yo-yo retrieve off of the bottom to keep that bait on bottom. Okay, a lot of these fish early in the spring when the water is cold are not traveling. So you're going to catch fish that are hunkered down on bottom. That is key. As we start to get into more of the middle of early spring, if you will, like mid 40s, that's when you're going to want to start throwing more of a moving lipless crankbait that you're going to work a little bit differently. So for me this year, I'm going to play around with the Lucky Craft LV150. And Matthew had to deal with this in his last live stream and showing baits and them not focusing for him properly. So I'm glad that you feel my pain, dude. But LV150 and the Jackal TN60 are two baits that I look forward to throwing, even though they are this nose down type of posture and, meant to be fished on more of a yo-yo retrieve. These baits can be fished on a straight retrieve very well. And the sound profile that they put out is very loud, very obnoxious, and will get the attention of bass from far away. So that to me is important. Now let's find the lipless box. And I'll tell you a couple of other baits that I'm going to throw in that middle time of the early pre-spawn. A big one for me is going to be a suspending lipless crankbait. So these guys right here are the IMA Suspending Vibe. So literally by IMA, and it's called the Suspending Vibe Lipless Crankbait. A little bit fatter body, but this thing will suspend at roughly 3 to 4 feet subsurface. Same deal with this guy right here, which is the 6 Sense Quake 80 Suspending. Okay, that's a bigger profile than the IMA Suspending Vibe, but that is going to be a key bait to work on a slow retrieve and kill it sort of presentation where you bridge the gap between a lipless and a jerk bait, which is pretty awesome. Couple of others that I do really like and plan to use frequently are the Spro Aruku shad. This is great for fishing low and slow on a hop or on a straight retrieve. And it's got a very high pitch, more subtle type of rattle. And then the last one that I want to mention, specifically, because I don't want to mention every lipless crankbait out there right now, is the Strike King Red Eye Shad. And the reason for that, in the middle of early spring fishing when the water is cold, is that this bait has a fantastic action on the fall. So it casts well, but it's relatively light for its size. So you can bomb it out there and let it fall, and it's going to have an action on the fall. And then you can do whatever you want with it. This bait does really well at swimming in the middle and the upper portion of the water column. So kind of as a counterpart to what I would see as the Lucky Craft and the Jackal lipless crankbaits, the Strike King is better for fishing up higher and in the middle of the water column. So I will more likely let this fall for a few seconds, about 3 to 5 feet deep, and then start working it on a straight retrieve, and then maybe kill it from time to time. Yo-yo it. I will vary my retrieve with the Red Eye Shad throughout a cast more than I will with pretty much any other lipless crankbait. So that is something to keep in mind, is just all the different ways that you can fish the Red Eye Shad, and how good of a lipless it is. Now, as we get into the warmer part of early spring and the early part of true pre-spawn, I'll still throw that Red Eye Shad, but that's when I'm going to start going to a faster moving lipless crankbait. Okay, so the Red Eye Shad is good for burning, but really there are two main baits that I'm going to throw when the water starts to warm up, the fish start to become more active. One of them is the Bill Lewis Rattletrap. This is a tried and true, awesome lipless crankbait that has a unique kind of mid-range or slightly deeper rattle. It has like a million BBs in it. I don't know that I have a clear one to be able to show you right now, but this thing is almost full of BBs. Okay. After that, the other one that I love fishing on a burning style retrieve. Where is she? I should have a couple in here, but I don't know why they're evading me right now. Or I can't find them. Maybe I only really have them in like red patterns. But let's see if I can find one. Maybe I just give them all to my kids. All right, the Cotton Cordell Super Spot. I don't know where one is in my box, which is weird because I should have them readily available. They are the most affordable lipless crankbait on the market. the Cotton Cordell Super Spot. It's got a very high pitch rattle to it, and it's really good for fishing fast and high in the water column. So I will burn a Cotton Cordell Super Spot. I will also fish a Rattletrap very quick, high in the water column. Then I'll move to a Strike King Red Eye Shad as I'm fishing just a little bit deeper. And then something like a Spro Aruku Shad in the middle and on bottom, along with those Lucky Craft and Jackal lipless crankbaits. So that pretty much covers the lipless category. And we will move on to category number 2 in 1 second. I'm sorry, I'm not responding to comments. Daniel says, I told Matt after the stream, I think most have that bait cam focus issue. Yeah, no doubt, right? If I just hold it up, oh, bam, just like that. Oh, bam. Here's a trick, Matt. If you're stuck out of focus, if you get your bait in focus and you pull away too quickly, it might not always get you back in focus quickly. Go out, go in, let it catch. And then if you come out, sometimes you have to wave in front of the camera to trigger it to refocus, okay? So while I was just showing you that bait, we might as well jump ahead on the list to that, okay? And number 2 on my list is a jerkbait, specifically a suspending jerkbait. But Daniel says, have you tried the Azuma Shaker Z? I've heard it talked about some. Do I have that in here? So I've thrown it, but I haven't had a lot of success on it, okay? I don't have a lot of them, but you can see I've got line tied on to this bait. This is the Azuma. I don't know if that's upside down or what, but this is that bait that you're talking about. One thing that makes it unique is its very fat profile. Look at the belly of this thing. This looks like a really healthy bait fish. Most lipless crankbaits are pretty narrow in nature, not this one. So this guy's going to displace quite a bit more water. And it has a loud, high-pitched rattle. Comes with great stock hooks on it. And I like it, but I think it's probably better for like a true pre-spawn bite than an early spring bite, okay? So ordinarily, I prefer a lipless crankbait that is a little bit more narrow in profile than wide early in the season when the water's cold. And that's going to be true of all baits in general, right? Something that's going to displace less water. Hopefully I can find my words a little bit better throughout the night. Midwest Fisherman says, so glad you mentioned suspending lipless jerkbait. Bill Lewis discontinued their Red Zone Rattletrap. Broke my heart. Yeah, a couple manufacturers used to make suspending lipless crankbaits and do not any longer. So there's only a handful of them on the market. And the 2 that I showed you are really the most mainstream, being that IMA suspending vibe and the 6 Sense Quake 80 suspending. Different sounds, different sizes. I like that IMA just a little bit better. All right. Matt says, those old school Bill Lewis rattle traps sound really good, not as loud, and those Berkeley Frenzy rattlers as well. Dude, I don't even know that bait. The Berkeley Frenzy Rattler. Interesting. Cotton Cordell Super Spot rocks for shallow grass beds and thick cover. Yeah, no, because of its narrow profile, it's really good for fishing up shallow, up high in the water column, and for ripping out of grass. So I don't do a lot of fishing a trap in the grass whereas I would throw a chatterbait in that situation like 80% of the time. But I know that that's still a very popular way to fish a lipless crankbait. So, yeah, I would agree with that. Great technique for that bait specifically. So, number 2 is a jerk bait. We're going to move on to talking about jerk baits. And these are my warm water jerk baits. So, we're not going to talk about these ones specifically. I'm going to need to find my cold water jerk baits, but just so you guys know what is in my warm water jerkbait box, I've got Lucky Craft Pointer 100s. I've got Rapala Rip Stops. I've got Lucky Craft Pointer XR98s. Lucky Craft Shadow Wraps and Shadow Wrap Shads. Specifically the Rapala X Wraps. And maybe some of the Strike King jerkbaits in here as well. So those are ones that I'm probably not going to go to quite as frequently as I will this more refined box of jerkbaits that I use quite a bit more when I'm jerkbaiting, and especially when the water is cold. So we've talked about this topic kind of a lot recently, but let's just run through it again. So, in my opinion, the Megabass Vision 110 is the best cold water suspending jerkbait on the market. Yeah, it's super pricey, coming in at 25 bucks a pop, but it is really, really tough to beat. Super refined bait. It's got a loud sound to it. It's got a really good weight transfer system. It's not a magnetic weight transfer system, but this thing casts like a bullet. It will go down to its proper depth of roughly 4 to 6 feet, and it will suspend perfectly at like a 30-degree angle, slightly nose down, and this thing will stay in place. So when the water is very, very cold, you need a bait like this that you can let soak for upwards of 15, 20, maybe even 30 seconds at a time between twitches. And then a quick little twitch, twitch, let it sit. Twitch, let it sit for a long time. Twitch, 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 let it sit. So it can sometimes take you minutes per retrieve with a jerk bait when the water is cold. Now, I like to throw the Vision 110 regular, not the plus one, not the plus two, the regular that dives 4 to 6 feet most of the time. Now, if the bait is a little bit smaller, if the fish are a little bit smaller, I will sometimes go to a Vision 110 Junior. Now, disregard the bill length on this. This is just the first one I grabbed. That's the plus one. So here's the Vision 110 Junior. Same diving depth, smaller profile on this guy, okay? So here's the side-by-side of what we're working with in terms of size difference. It's not substantial, but every little part matters. The bait is narrower, the bait is shorter, and therefore a little less intimidating. The sound also, let me get this for you. It's a little bit higher pitch on this 110 Junior than it is on the 110. If you've got fish that are more finicky, if you've got fish that are more pressured, if you've got fish that see a lot more jerk baits and even see more Vision 110s, a good way to go is with the 110 Silent. I had that right. Vision 110 Silent is great for pressured water and for clear water, where you've got spookier fish in general. So the Megabass Vision 110 makes my list as the top jerkbait to use in cold water. Now, I'm not only going to use that matte shad color. I will use a wide variety of different colors. You know, the Megabass Sexy Shad is a great one. Even Table Rock or Elegy Bone are great colors. But then I will go to, depending on water clarity, I will go to something like a Deadly Black Shad or something more like a, what do they call this? I don't know, this pearlish color. What do they call it, guys? Help a brother out. Something like GG Pearl Flash. I don't remember what they call it. It's very close to this color pattern that Hank Cherry won the classic on, I think last year, that has this orange belly. And the reason that now Berkeley makes the Stunna in that same color pattern, which is what they call the Hanky Panky. Okay, so the Berkeley Stunna makes my list, even though I haven't fished it, as baits that are kind of a little bit less expensive, but good for cold water, solid suspending bait. And I do recommend it. So I hate to say I recommend it. I hate to say that I also recommend the 13 Fishing Loco Special, because neither are baits that I have actually put time into. And so it's a little bit unfair for me to recommend them to you, but they fit in that category of baits that are refined, are mid-price category, but are supposed to be good at what they do. Another two baits that I will mention that are right in that same category for suspending jerkbaits, but that are a little bit cheaper than that $15 price range. And you'll notice I skipped over the Jackal re-range. Even though it's a flat-sided bait, it has a lot of flash and an aggressive action that is more shallow in nature. So it is meant almost to be fished a little bit quicker. And so I'm not going to throw the re-range until a little bit later as we get into pre-spawn. Adam says, I got the 110 in a limited edition color from ALF. Right on, dude. Sounds sweet. Matt says, I got that suspending lipless because of you. It looks good and has a good sound. Yeah, man. Well, I'm glad to hear that you checked it out. Yeah, Ima is an underrated company from Japan for sure. I'll mention one of their jerkbaits in just a second here as kind of another oddball lure, another crossover lure. So two baits that you need to have in your arsenal for jerkbaits that do not totally break the bank, but are super high quality out of the package. One is the Spro mixed stick in the 110 size. They make this bait in a couple different sizes, so it can be confusing what this bait is designed to do. But the 110 is more of a true suspender, goes right in that 5 to 7 feet of water. Because of its bill shape, it does dive a little bit deeper, but it is made to be a true suspender, has a great action, and a great weight transfer system. As you would suspect from a Spro bait, this thing comes with Gamakatsu hooks on it, straight out of the package. Super sticky sharp. These are round bend hooks. This is one of the few jerk baits that I do not mess with at all, straight out of the package, along with Megabass and maybe a couple of others. But the other one that I mentioned from time to time is the dual hardcore minnow flat And this is the 110 SP size. I also really like it in its smaller brother, which is the 95 SP. So both of these baits, as you can see, have 3 treble hooks on them, which in my opinion is huge, especially for a smaller downsized jerkbait like you get out of the Megabass Vision 110 Junior. Really rare to see a bait that is 4 inches or less with 3 hooks on it. So really well designed that you get a treble hook close to the front of the bait, kind of medium or slightly behind the middle of the bait, and then on the rear. So these trebles do not hang up. This bait is designed perfectly. Now, what makes this bait unique is that there's a magnetic weight transfer system in this bait, just like you get out of pretty much all of the dual hardcore baits. They have this in their crankbaits as well. So really cool system. Let me see if I can do this without hooking myself, but I'll show you right now. You can see 2 balls up front here, right? As you cast, one of those balls goes to the back of the bait. And as you start retrieving, that ball shifts to the front and attaches to that front ball, and it stays there. That ball does not move throughout the retrieve. It takes a lot of force to get that thing to shift to the back of the bait. So the Jackal Re-Range and a couple of other baits on the market have this same magnetic weight transfer system, and it's great. This bait suspends well, if not has a slightly, really slow float. So that can be adjusted with suspend strips or an extra split ring or a slightly upsized hook on one of the 3 hook hangers. But this bait, like the Jackal Re-Range, has flat sides. So I really like that early in the spring when the water is cold. And this thing will dive deeper than the Jackal Re-Range, so I like it for that reason. So the dual hardcore minnow flat in the 110 and the 95 sizes are great depending on the size of the bait. So check those guys out. Those are the main ones that I will mention. About a half a dozen different jerk baits that I think are great for early in the spring when the water is cold. Sorry, I'm a couple of comments behind. Matt says, what's everyone's favorite jerkbait? I like the Edo Shiner from Megabass and the Trick Darter. Yeah, so the Trick Darter is a smaller profile with the 2 hooks on it. I have not totally dialed in when and where I prefer to throw that. But my understanding is that both the Edo Shiner and the Trick Darter have a little bit more of an aggressive action. So if we're talking overall favorite jerkbait, I suppose it's fine for you to work that into the conversation. But if we're talking about what we are tonight in early spring, cold water conditions, I don't know that either one of those jerkbaits work their way into the conversation necessarily. I love to fish for bass says, what's up, bro? Been watching the past few streams, just haven't commented lately. Just bought my first Edo 110 today. Right on. Your first Vision 110 or Edo Shiner? I assume you're talking about Vision 110. Well, sweet. And thank you for mentioning your name's Derek. I will do my best to call you by Derek and not I love to fish for bass. And you got the Table Rock SP color. That's a great one, especially for fishing around smallies or in water that is slightly stained. So I think you will like that, no doubt. So if it's your one and only, fish it well. Be a little bit picky about when and where you use it. Just know that it will dive a good 5 feet deep. So if you're fishing from the bank, make sure you've got a good drop off. You've got a place where fish like to hang at that drop off, and you're making a long cast and working the bait slowly so that if and when you get to that danger zone where the water starts to get shallow, that you are just pulling up and bringing that thing back to you. Do not risk getting it hung up. It's not a great feeling losing a $25 bait when you don't have backups. Adam says the color was Sunset Teaser. What bait are you talking about, dude? Oh, that custom color of the 110? That sounds good. Sunset Teaser, huh? No, Matt, Black Shad. I already explained which one was the deadly Black Shad, but Daniel's right. GP Stain Reaction. That is the one that Hank Cherry threw with the orange belly, though. GP Stain Reaction OB was the one that he was throwing at the Classic, I think, last year. Matt says the I'm a Shaker is one of my top flat sides. It's a sweet crank for sure. Right on, dude. That's one that I have had on my list from time to time. It's made its way on and then off. I don't know why I haven't pulled the trigger on it, but thank you for the reminder. I might just have to pick a couple up. And Matt says those Megabass LBOs sound like your rod is breaking when casting. I thought something was wrong with the guides. Yeah, that's the same thing that will happen when you're throwing any bait with the magnetic weight transfer system. It makes such a loud clank sound when you're throwing the Jackal re-range. Sorry, I've got so many baits attached to this. The Jackal re-range, when you're throwing this guy, and when you're throwing that LBO, the magnetic weight transfer system, it will sound so loud and scary when you go to load up that it sounds like something's breaking, like you hit your rod on something behind you and cracked the rod as you're going to bomb your cast out there. It takes a little bit of getting used to for sure. In fact, I don't even know if you quite can get used to it. It's a weird feeling for sure. Derek says, yes, sir. Vision 110, my dude. All right. You're going to be cautious with it. 100%. Thanks for the tips. Yeah, no problem. Matt says, I use the Ito Shiner right now, Tyler. Don't underestimate it. It has some secondary action, so if you work it slow, it's perfect for cold water. Caught my PB last year on March 10th in 44-degree water. No way. Well, good to know, man. You got me kind of tempted to pick up a couple of those. That's another bait that is on my list of really Megabass jerkbaits that I do not already own. So, kind of tempted to get a couple, but they're also $25. So, there's got to be a time and a place and a planned bigger purchase to grab a couple of those. So we'll see. I've got my monthly order for discount tackle loaded up in my cart, but I might adjust a little bit of that. So we'll see. Matt says, Epic Eric says he loves those I'm a Shakers. Great river bait. Good to know. Okay, let's move on to category number 3. And that we might as well talk about what we were just kind of mentioning, or Matt was mentioning, and that is the good old flat-sided crankbait, okay? So, we've talked about all hard baits to this point. Talked about the lipless crankbait, which I did not mention at the time, but technically a lipless crankbait bridges the gap, helps us transition from winter and where blade baits really excel to then where a lipless crankbait comes into play a little bit more. So, of course, you can throw a blade bait in the early spring when the water is cold and have great success with it, but a blade bait is going to be much better when you're vertically jigging, and a lipless crankbait can be used in those situations. So, especially those two that I mentioned with the LV500 and the Jackal TN70, better for vertically fishing as well as a long bomb cast and a slow hop off of bottom. So, I'm going to talk about kind of two categories at once here when it comes to the flat side crankbait. So first, let's talk about the traditional flat side crankbait. Last week, I mentioned a few of my favorites, and I explained to you how this box of mine breaks down. And essentially, what I've got is from deep to shallow in this box. So, technically speaking, early in the spring, I'm going to throw something like a deeper diving flat-sided crankbait. This is the Berkeley Fritz-side in the 9. So very thin flat-sided crankbait, very tight wobble, but good deflection properties with this coffin-shaped bill. I throw the 7 and the 9, but not for very long during the season. Okay, here's the 7, here's the 9. So a little bit smaller with the 7 and a slightly shallower diver. I do prefer that 7 over the 9, but both are great early on when you want to be fishing on or around the bottom. Okay, same situation. I'm going to throw something like the Strike King KVD 1.5 flat. This is a middle of the road flat side crankbait. As you can see, it's got a pretty long bill. This thing dives like 7 to 9 feet, but it's not quite as narrow as the Berkeley Fritz side. So this thing's going to have a slightly wider wobble and displace more water while still also diving in that mid depth range of 7 to 10 feet, depending on the size of the line that you're using. The 1.5 flat is an underrated bait, and it does have a very subtle rattle. You guys can probably hear the clicking of my alarm system over the rattle in here. But very quiet rattle system in this guy. And it's kind of slept on. It's a good one for sure. Worth looking into. Both of those are great for really cold water. I'm going to skip over a couple baits, which I like to use slightly later in the pre-spawn, like the Storm Arashi flat-sided crankbait, like this 6 Sense Crush Flat 75X. And I'm going to immediately talk about two baits as we start to get a little bit more shallow. And if I can get these untangled, I will show you. This is why I put those freaking rubber bands on these baits, and I haven't had a chance to do so with this box yet. And it's taking me forever to untangle these hose. So, all right. Here we go. Early on in the pre-spawn, more in, say, late 40s, as the fish start to move up a little bit. They're on the move, but I find that they're still kind of in between. These two flat-sided crankbaits are going to move, going to dive somewhere in the ballpark of 5 to 7 feet. And first, we've got the Rapala OG Slim 6. So that dives right in that 4 to 6. And this guy right here, the Strike King Chick Magnet. We've got slightly different profiles. You get a little bit longer of a bait in the OG Slim than you get with the Chick Magnet. But they both have really deep bellies, and they both have fairly flat bodies. This is like a middle of the road flat body. So I think it's a perfect water displacement for kind of that cold water, but not super cold water. You get that circuit board lip that is rounded, so you get the durability, you get the deflection. Perfect middle of the road flat side crankbait altogether. Now, as you start to move shallower than that, water can still be cold, but if you find that fish are relating a bit more shallow, if you're catching fish closer to the bank, if they're doing their thing a little bit more early on, one thing that you might want to do is switch to a shallower diving and smaller bodied flat-sided crankbait. So you'll see all of these baits switch to a round body shallow diving crankbait as we get into the pre-spawn, something that is more of a balsa like a DT4, DT6, something along those lines. But early when the water is cold, it's going to be these three baits when I'm wanting to fish up shallow. And that is the Evergreen Flat Force in the, well, they only make the Flat Force 4. I don't believe they make different diving depths to this guy. Also, the Rapala Tiny Og4. It's got a skinnier body than its bigger brother. And then the Berkeley Fritside in the tiny, or what do they call it? The 5 Junior. Really small guy here. So I'll put these up next to each other so you can see the size difference. These are all shallow diving, finesse, flat side crankbaits for shallow water. Not doing a great job there. These hooks are getting me, and it doesn't feel great, but let's see if I can do this for you. Ow. Okay. So all small bodied crankbaits. Literally, we go from tiny to small to more normal size. This is like a 3/8. This is like a 1/4. This is like a 5/6 or a 3/16. Maybe it's a quarter and a 5/16 and a 3/8, something like that. But these are all going to dive right in the range of 5 feet, 4 feet. So shallow divers, but still have a really tight action. You'll see that none of these are very wide in nature. The Flat Force is more of that middle of the road water displacement that you're going to get, whereas the Tiny OG4 and that Berkeley Fritside 5 in the Junior are pretty narrow. So those are going to be my go-tos for flat-sided crankbaits early in the spring. Great bait to throw when the water's in the 40s. You know, once you get into the 50s and you're in that true pre-spawn, you're going to want to start transitioning from a flat-sided crankbait to more of a square bill crankbait. Okay, so I will talk about that in an upcoming video, but let me catch up on these comments real quick. Derek says, this is one of those few techniques I haven't fished much. I'm all ears for advice on the flat sides. Okay, so I didn't talk much about how to fish the flat-sided crankbait, but with the flat-sided crankbait, I am mostly fishing them on a straight retrieve that is somewhere in the slow to medium speed, but at a methodical pace. I want to be making contact with the bottom because, as we talked about earlier with the lipless crankbait, a lot of times when the water is cold, those fish are relating to the bottom. So you want to be bumping bottom or be very close to it. So if I'm making too much aggressive contact with the bottom, that thing's digging, I might let it float up a little bit and then work it a little bit more slowly. So I know I'm just barely off of bottom and that thing is just wiggling tight. Then throughout the retrieve, I'll speed it up so it contacts the bottom, then let it float back up a little bit and then keep working it. So I am not digging bottom the entire time that people will with a deep diving crankbait or something like that. But a flat side, in my opinion, is meant to be fished close to or on the bottom, as opposed to in the middle of the water column. Okay. Now, technically, the same could be said about all crankbaits, but I think it's especially true and necessary with flat-side crankbaits when you're fishing them in shallow water, and they're going to have that tighter action. Some other crankbaits, like square bells, um, will have their own erratic action. Even medium diving crankbaits that you're going to fish in the middle or deeper part of the water column, but not always be digging and dredging bottom, will have their own hunting action. They're going to wander a bit. A flat-sided crankbait will rarely, if ever, do that. It's going to just wiggle more than wobble. Okay. So keep that in mind. You want it diving down to the depth you want and then ticking bottom and then kind of swimming, ticking bottom, kind of swimming for the most part. Matt says, Tyler, do you prefer plastic flat sides over balsa and why? Um, no, I don't. I don't necessarily have a preference. It depends on the type of structure that I'm fishing. So, if I'm fishing denser rock or anywhere around wood, I do prefer balsa because of that high float. If I'm fishing more in open water or with something with a soft bottom, I'd probably prefer plastic, but not necessarily. Um, there just are more plastic flat sides out there. And I would say more than half of my flat sides are plastic as well. It's not necessarily about the action so much as it is about the flotation and the durability. So it's all about what I'm fishing around. Guggen Slayer, appreciate it, man. I don't know how late I am on that comment, but what's up, dude? Derek says, I absolutely love regular square bills. I got a flat side Little John 50 to start with once we get open water. Sweet. That's a great one to start with. I actually don't really have or throw the Little John much, so that's one that I need to update into my arsenal and start throwing more. And you get to know, but I've only heard good things about that bait, and I'm sure that you'll like it for sure. Daniel loves the Crush 75X flat. I do too, but I like it a little bit later in the pre-spawn and really year round, just not super, super early. And yes, I'm also hearing that the Tiny Og4 is fire, and it is one that I'm perhaps most excited about throwing here early in the 2022 season. So, yeah, dude. Derek says, anyone else like to mess with their tackle while watching and listening? I do, but personally, it's a little different when I'm presenting, talking to you guys. I'm not messing with my tackle quite as much. I'm looking at some of it, right? Um, and I've got a little bit of everything in front of me right now. So, yeah, I like to daydream. I also just like to come down here and fiddle around at any hour of the day, usually late at night. When I'm not wanting to watch a TV show with my wife, I'll just come down here, reorganize, or just look at stuff and kind of think about either what I want to talk about with you guys or what I want to use in certain situations this upcoming season, what have you. I love to tinker. I'm with you there, dude. And Matt says the box that he got from Eric is the flat side box. So sweet. Guys, if you want to hear more about flat sided crankbaits, check out Matt, aka South Jersey Fisherman 028. Check out his live stream coming up on Sunday. He's going to unbox a box full of flat sided crankbaits from Epic Eric, who definitely knows his stuff. Derek says he's currently building his spring box for Ohio. Sweet dude. Also got an Evergreen CR2 today. Didn't see the flat side where I was. Not quite sure what you're saying there, but yeah, Evergreen makes great baits, and I'm not sure if you're talking about a flat-sided crankbait from Evergreen or the combat crank. I'm not sure what the CR2 quite is. All right, let me try and catch up here quick. Whoa, just skipped ahead. Daniel says, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, everybody. No doubt. There's 13 people in here right now, 11 thumbs up. If you haven't already, hit that thumbs up button for me real quick. Every little bit helps. That says I'm definitely looking to see how good these Mibro flat sides. Do they look good though? And lips are super thin for regular plastic. Okay, Mibro. Kid Iraq Ray in the house. Yo, bro, where were you? I was looking all over at the classic for you. Dude, I don't go to the classic. Haven't ever been to the classic. You might see me there in a couple of years from now, but for now, that's not really my jam. I am not a big time fisherman. That's not my deal just yet. Now that said, if I get some sponsorships, if I get some companies that want to send me or bring me to the classic, by all means, I'd be happy to. But yeah, that's not me just yet, man. Megaforce, Mark, what's up, dude? How you doing tonight? Daniel says my problem is filling my shopping cart while watching. LOL. That's funny. Well, sorry, that's never my intent. I'm not trying to sell baits to you guys. You guys know that only one out of every few streams am I actually dropping a link to anything from Discount Tackle. They're the only company that I'm affiliated with. So it doesn't do me any good to try and convince you guys to buy baits. I'm just telling you what I own, what I like, what I plan to fish, etc. So sorry, but I'm also not sorry. You know what I mean? Ray says, I threw my first 110, was in 18 foot of water, nothing was around. Just wanted to test it out. And the bill broke first cast. No way. No, Ray. What? How did the bill break on the first cast? What did you make contact with, dude? Oh, that's horrible. I'm so sorry to hear that. Was that a bait that I sent you or that you bought yourself? Because that sounds like a miserable experience, and I'm so sorry, regardless of whether I had anything to do with it or not. That's brutal. Derek says it says CR2 on the top of the crankbait. It's just a normal square bill. I mentioned that when you brought up the flat force from Evergreen. Yeah, no, I know that's why you brought it up, but the Evergreen CR2. I should be familiar with that bait, but I'm not. Most of you guys know that I do not throw a wide variety of square bill crankbaits. At least I have not until this year. I'm starting to round out my collection a little bit more. I really used to only throw the Strike King KVD 1.5 and the Lucky Craft LC 1.5 for a handful of years. While I like a square bill crankbait, there are other baits that I throw in lieu of it pretty frequently. So I've only recently started to build out my arsenal of square bill crankbaits and shallow diving crankbaits. And so, yeah, I'm just not totally familiar with that CR2. But Justin says, Tyler, help me procure a fire craw jackhammer. Okay, here you go. Can you grab it through the screen, dude? 1, 2, 3, grab it. Oh no. I thought you had it, man. I thought you had it. You ready? One. Did you get it? Did you get it? I hope you caught that. Oh wait. Here it is. Sorry, my man. Dude, I forget what we were supposed to be trading. Let's talk about it, man. I'm sorry. Derek says I just got a fire craw jackhammer today as well. Sweet, man. It's about that time of year, no doubt. So I've got the fire craw jackhammer. I've got the fire craw mini max ready to rock. But guys, these are not going to make my list until the middle of the pre-spawn. This is not on my list of early spring baits when the water is cold. So, little spoiler alert for you for these last two categories that we're going to talk about. But, yeah, sorry. I've only got a couple of brand spanking new Firecraw jackhammers that are in the package, both in a 1/2 ounce. You guys know I prefer to throw a 3/8 most of the time, and I probably have a couple of other ones in my chatterbait box that are unused, but I don't have like a lot, you know. So I've got like a handful of them that are ready to rock this season. And I probably won't work my way all the way through them, but I do like to have a little bit of extra stock on me. So Adam says also check Discount Tackle lately. Wait, also check Discount Tackle. What's your question about what? The Firecraw jackhammer that is rarely in stock at Discount Tackle, and because the deals are so good, they don't last for very long when they come back in stock. So I wish I could be better about notifying you guys of that, and then we're all kind of helping each other out. But I just quite frankly don't have the time to be checking their website all the time to see when those come in stocks, because it seems like people have their notifications turned on. What you can do is on Discount Tackle on their website, you go look up the jackhammer chatterbait and go to the Firecraw color. It will show sold out. You can click notify me and then plug in your email address, and it will literally send you an email when they get that color of that bait back in stock, and you can make a purchase immediately. Okay, keep that in mind. Mark says it's all good. Just picked up the Lose Mock Crush combo to try out. That's a good one. I've got it. I like it. It's not my favorite per se, but I've been using it pretty heavily for the last couple of years, especially because the rod that I have is a 7.3 medium heavy moderate. Maybe it's moderate fast, but either way, that's been a great lipless crankbait and chatterbait combo for me that I do really like. You know, with that medium heavy power and that moderate action has been crucial for me. But I think that Mock Crush reel, is okay. Actually, no, I've only got the Mock. Sorry, I've got the Mach 2, not the Mock Crush. It's the green one, not the red one. I think the Mock Crush is the red one. Ah, Matt, what are you talking about? Tell someone what who will believe it. You guys are flying right now. I gotta catch up quick. All right. Ray says there was nothing there. The bill just broke on nothing. I was throwing the Stunna 112+1 before that and a $5 Academy one. No idea how it broke. That is super sad, and I'm sorry to hear it, especially because I understand why that would spoil your experience with a $25 jerkbait. Now, is it worth reaching out to Megabass about? I don't know. I mean, it's worth a shot in the dark. They might send you a free bait or wherever you bought it from. You just let them know that you're disappointed with the experience of it, and you might be able to get one replaced. I don't know, but that's horrible, dude. I'm sorry. Justin, if you messaged me on Facebook, you're almost guaranteed not going to hear back from me. So at least hit me up on my Gmail account. Hooksets are free 18 at gmail.com. That's probably your best bet. Or on Instagram. But again, I'm not on either one all that frequently, but I'm on Facebook like next to never. All right. Derek says, I'm all about the square bill. Flat side, not so much. Ton of shallow water rivers here, buddy. Yeah, I hear you, man. Totally understand. But there is a time and a place for a tighter wiggle instead of a wobble. Almost all square bill crankbaits are going to have round bodies and are going to have much more of a wobble to them than a wiggle that a flat-sided crankbait will. And there's something about that tight action in cold water that gets bit much better. All right. All right. Derek says, I caught his jackhammer. Nice throw, Tyler. No problem. Anybody else want a jackhammer? You're welcome to have it. You want a wicked underground JDM chatterbait? You got it. You want a Techo blade waker? You got it. I don't keep a lot of baits in their packages. You guys know that. But I've got a handful that are. And, well, more than a handful, but still. I like to take my baits out and put them in their packages. There's a reason that my desk looks like this. And that's because I take things out of the package. So, yeah. Derek wants to know what's number 4. Let's move on. I can't catch up with you guys in the comments. Number 4, all right, is the swim bait. Number 4 is the swim bait. And this is a double category, okay? I'm going to talk about 2 types of swim baits here. One is a soft bait, one is a hard bait. And just like others, I'm going to give you a couple of options, but in terms of the hard bait or the soft bait, you guys already know I am throwing the Megabass Magdraft Freestyle most of the time. I really like this bait. Okay. It's a super good value bait for what it is. This is a somewhat speed sensitive, so this is not a crawler style bait. This entire swim bait category is meant for a little bit later in the early spring. So, of course, you can catch them in early 40s, but really, in my opinion, this is for mid to late 40s, depending on the body of water that you've got. So, the Magdraft Freestyle comes with a hook slot on top of the bait, a hook slit that is about halfway through the belly of the bait, solid nose, really good details here, but you'll see that the tail has just a little bit of action, okay? It's not like it has no action, it's not dead, but this thing does not bend all the way over. This is not a Keitech, okay? So a lot of people would say throw a Keitech because what you're going to do with this bait is fish it like you would a Rattletrap or a flat-sided crankbait. You're going to bring this thing all the way to bottom and low and slow, just swim this as slowly as you can so that that tail is just barely kicking. Just a very slow retrieve with a wide action swim bait. And that is one thing you can do, but that is not on my list of top 5. Instead, I'm going to use a bait like this Magdraft Freestyle, and I'm going to rig it on something like a Owner Beast 6/0 or a Owner Flashy Swimmer 5/0 or a Trokar bladed, what do they call it? Swim blade in the 5/0. Those are some of my favorite choices of hooks for the Magdraft Freestyle. And I actually caught my first fish of the year last year. I think it was in late March. Maybe it was early April. On this rig right here. And maybe it wasn't bladed, actually. I think it was just an Owner Beast 6/0 on this guy here. So it was in this color, and this is the albino pearl color. A little bit both overrated and underrated at the same time. So really good bait. However, it's a little bit speed sensitive. So if you look at this, if I move it very slowly, it has almost no action. Okay. If you fish this thing on a slow retrieve, it's going to look dead. It will not attract fish. If you fish it too fast, it's going to be a little bit too wild. It's going to fish too high in the water. What you want to do is fish this thing at a medium or medium fast retrieve where it's got that perfect wag to it. And that will also cause the head to wiggle along with it. So this thing has a secondary action. Very, very good bait for a mid-size soft plastic swim bait, right at 6 inches. I like it a lot. It is right there at the top of my list for spring and early spring soft plastic swimmers. You get 2 in a pack for 12, maybe $13, but it's a better value in my opinion than the original Magdraft, which is the same price for one, but you can rig it a number of different ways. So better value, more versatility. Really, really like it. That way you can let it fall all the way to the bottom and then fish it at that medium speed retrieve closer to the bottom. Or as the water starts to warm up, you can parallel banks and fish it somewhere in that 3 to 5 feet of water on that same style retrieve. This is more of a straight chuck and wind type of bait. You're just going to let it sink to the depth that you want it and then work it methodically back at that medium to medium fast retrieve, okay? Matthew, what's up, dude? How you doing tonight? Ron, might as well face it. We are addicted to lures. You're right about that. No doubt, no doubt. Daniel says, owner calls it the flashy swimmer. Yeah, no, I know. I already mentioned that. The non-bladed is the beast. The bladed is the flashy swimmer. Trokar calls it the swim blade, which is the same thing as the flashy swimmer, but it's got a wider gap. I prefer it over the flashy swimmer. And then I prefer the owner beast over the Trokar version of their EWG, their weighted, belly weighted EWG style swim bait hook. That's my favorite one for sure, is the owner beast. But I like the Trokar bladed swimmer. And the reason for that, I'll show you the difference because I've got them both sitting here right now. So check this out. Here is the flashy swimmer. And here is the Trokar swim blade. These are both 5/0. Can you believe that? These are right next to each other. So not only do you see that wider gap, you can see the gap between the hook and the bait, but you also see the placement of the weight. So on this flashy swimmer, the weight is up closer to the nose of the bait, which when compressed, that weight makes contact with the soft plastic earlier, leaves for less gap. Okay. So on this Trokar swim blade, you get more gap and a later time before that weight makes contact with the bait. And better yet, it's far enough down to where this weight will actually go into the belly slit of the bait. And look at all that gap that you get. You do not even get close with the flashy swimmer because that weight is too high up. It will not make its way into the bait. And even if it did, That's what you'd be working with. Not much gap there, okay? So ordinarily, this is what you get. Not great. So the Trokar swim blade reigns supreme and is my preferred way. But if you're going to fish it without a blade, I really like the Owner Beast. It is perfectly centered on the bottom. You get a good gap and a good balance. So really good on pretty much all swim baits where you get a good gap, good center of a weight, where you get kind of that best of both worlds, okay? Now, let's move on from bigger, soft swim baits because I don't want to talk about a wider variety of soft plastic swim baits than the Magdraft Freestyle, because that really is my favorite and the one that I would recommend most. But the other side of the category is hard baits, and specifically glide baits. So this is not the time of year where I'm going to recommend throwing a multi-jointed hard swim bait. This is where I'm going to talk about throwing a glide bait. So if you want, of course, you could go to something like the River to Sea S-Waver. It's a good bait. It's a really affordable, solid entry-level glide bait. Nothing wrong with it at all. It's just not the most refined bait in the category. It has a relatively tight joint, so a lot of people will shave down the joint to get it to glide a little bit wider. But this is a bait that you're going to fish higher in the water column. You're not going to let it sink all the way down. So this is more of a bait that will attract suspended fish or attract followers that then you can go after with other baits. But this is a mostly known as a big profile bait that will attract bigger fish, show you where they live. So the S-Waver in the 168 and the 200 are good baits, but if you look at the travel on that joint, it is not substantial. So this is one where you might want to alter the bait straight out of the package. But regardless, with all of these glide baits, what you're going to do is cast it out there, let it sink for anywhere from a few seconds to 10 or 20 seconds, depending on how deep you want the thing to get. Average sink rate is maybe 1 foot every couple of seconds. Sometimes as much as 1 foot per second, but usually not that fast. So you're going to want to count down on average, maybe 1 foot per 3 seconds. So you will have to sometimes wait a while. But once the bait is out there, then you're going to reel up your slack and do some quick 3/4 turn reels of the handle. Get that bait darting side to side. So turn, turn, turn. Get that thing darting side to side. Kind of like a soft plastic jerk bait would with a fluke. Fluke is an underrated bait early in the spring as well. I did not talk about that. Not going to talk about it right now. A little bit better in the pre-spawn as we start warming up. But a glide bait is a really good bait to throw in cold water to get fish to show themselves and maybe start to commit. So as we're later in the 40s, earlier in the 50s, it's a great bait for starting to trigger fish who are thinking about feeding up. So this is a good time to throw, gizzard shad profiles like the Savage Gear Shine Glide. This is the 185 size, really good bait for the money. Just hooked myself. This is a gizzard shad profile. So if you've got gizzard shad in your water, that is an awesome one to throw. And it's got a solid glide for the money. In my opinion, better than the S-Waver. I think the best bang for the buck is the Sneaky Pete from G-Rat. Here, as you can see, I've put a bladed treble on here. This is this a homemade one? No, this is a size 2 from BMC. What? No, this is homemade. Sorry. So I actually made this bladed treble myself. I took a spinnerbait blade off of a Booyah spinnerbait. You can probably see that there. It says Booyah on the blade. So you know it's not the VMC bladed hybrid treble. And this is an Owner ST36 in either the size 1 or the 1/0. Now, I don't think I've traded out this rear treble just yet. This is still the stock hook that comes on these. These are like a hybrid style hook that is in between a round bend and an EWG. I don't love these hooks, but I also don't mind them too much. So, great thing about this bait is look at this. You get a lot more travel in that joint, so you get a much wider glide. You can work this thing slower, and it's going to travel much further than the S-Waver will. And it's got a little bit of a knock in it. And it's also affordable for its size. So this bigger size is close to the S-Waver 200 in size. And I want to say it costs like mid 30s. It's not a super expensive glide bait for what it is. And then a bait that is tried and true that I picked up toward the end of last season but did not really throw last year is the Depths Slide Swimmer. This is the 175 size in the carp color. This is a bait that has a super smooth gliding action. That was even just a bad replication of its action, but very, very natural swim to it. And it's got a plastic, people would call it a condom, but a plastic shell on top of the body. So what happens is this joint is silent, does not make any sound as it contacts itself. The only thing is if you work this bait really fast, you might hear the spring that's inside this bait, which does more than anything, it's to put out a frequency in the water than a rattle type of sound. So it's a different way of attracting fish. So those are the main glide baits that I'll mention. Really just 4. But a glide bait is going to work my way, work its way into my arsenal of early spring cold water baits when it comes to swim baits. So 6-inch soft plastic swimmers with the Megabass Magdraft, specifically the Magdraft Freestyle, or then a glide bait that is somewhere in that 6 to 7-inch range. So nothing giant, pushing 8 to 10 inches, nothing tiny in that 4 to 6-inch range. So hopefully that makes sense. That covers my swim bait category, and I've got one more to talk about, and I'm going to get to it in just a minute, okay? Matthew says, what hooks do you use for the Miyagi and the 5-inch Spark Shad? Okay. So I use a similar hook for both of them, and that is the 6/0 Owner Beast. And I'll just show you right now. I will rig up both of those plastics on this hook, okay? Because I don't really mind goofing up the noses of some of these baits. Maybe it's because I'm starting to get a little drunk, maybe not. But this right here is the Owner Beast in the 6/0. I upgrade the size of that CPS spring to a large instead of the medium. I just find that it holds the nose a little bit better on this bait. But let's grab a 5-inch spark shad. Right now I've got a Gamakatsu weighted EWG on there, and I think it's only okay. I don't use it all that much. So what you'll notice is as I put this 6/0 beast on this 5-inch spark shad, that there's almost going to be too much gap on this swim bait. Okay, so I like to screw it all the way until it butts up there. And then I'm just going to match it up. And this is literally going to go all the way to the back of that hook section, comes straight out the middle of the back, and then to expose it. And this looks a little wonky, but that's what we're dealing with. So you'll see that the gap on this owner beast is a little bit wide for the Megabass Spark Shad. So that is why I had it on this Gamakatsu hook. I think the Berkeley Fusion hook is a good one too. That is not going to be an overly wide gap. But I just have a lot of confidence in the owner beast 6/0 for anything that's in that 5 to 6 inch range. So yeah, that Megabass Spark Shad in the 5-inch is a really good bait. You know, it's got a lot of tail kick to it. I think it bridges the gap quite nicely between like a Keitech and that Megabass Magdraft Freestyle, but it's more stable of an action. So, in my opinion, that's a little bit of a downside, is that you get a lot of tail and not a lot of head action in it. So, I do like the Spark Shad in the smaller sizes when thrown on like an Okashira screwhead or something along the lines of that, or on just a ball head jig. But when I'm throwing a weedless hook like this, I want something that's got a little bit of dual action, or more subtle of an action. So I do like this 13 fishing BAMF shad because it's so realistic looking. But let's move on to the other bait you were talking about. And which one were you asking about? The Miyagi. Always got to smell the Miyagi Swimmer. It smells like straight garlic and like you're ready to go cook some delicious dinner. So again, I'm going to go straight in the nose, but under the chin on the Miyagi Swimmer. Line this puppy up. Come out straight through the middle of the back. And bring this guy through. So the Miyagi Swimmer was designed to go with the 6/0 beast. And in my opinion, this is the best hook for it, is the owner beast 6/0. But that Megabass Spark Shad 5-inch is not as deep of a bait as the Miyagi Swimmer. So not necessarily as ideal of a hook, but I do think you still want a belly weighted 5/0 hook. You can get away with a 4/0, but I think 5 or 6/0 is the best size for a 5-inch soft plastic swim bait. Okay. So the Miyagi Swimmer is right at 5 inches. It's 4.75. And it's designed to be thrown with a 6/0 hook. So if you go down to a 4/0 hook, you're probably going too small. You'll see on the Miyagi Swimmer packaging that it says that it's designed to use with a 6/0 keel-weighted screw lock hook. So, yeah. Matt says, Tyler, did you see the new 13 fishing swim baits, the wedge tail versions of older baits? They look pretty good, especially the bluegill. I did see those, and I'm not totally sure what I think about them, if we're being honest. I mean, of course, it's compelling, right? But they're a little bit late to the market in doing it. So, I don't know. I think Savage Gear already did it really well. And I think 13 Fishing is trying to take some of the market that Savage Gear has. And I don't know how I feel about it. So, will I ever try them? Probably. Do I want to get them right this minute? No, not really. That's just me. Derek says, do you have any honorable mentions of baits that you almost put into your top 5 spring lures? I really like a shaky head personally for Ohio. So keep in mind, you say top 5 spring lures. This is not that. This is top 5 spring lures for early spring cold water fishing. The reason that the shaky head and a lot of other finesse techniques did not make their way into this category or into this list is rather that for me, early spring fishing is a time for search baits. A couple of baits that did not quite make the list for me, but will make their way onto more of a general spring list for me were the square bill crankbait, were the spinner bait, and the chatterbait. Okay, those did not make the list for me, but are baits that I use a lot in the spring and do recommend quite frequently. So Matt says, funny you're showing glides because I asked Oliver and I last night on live about using glides in 40 to 45-degree water. He said they will definitely work and to treat them like a big jerk bait and go real slow. Interesting. I did not see that. And good to know. Yeah. Like I said, generally speaking, I don't know about 40 to 45-degree water, but I'm thinking more about 45 to 50. As fish are starting to move up, as they're starting to follow and starting to chase, all of that matters. And so, as they're thinking about eating bigger meals, um, I think a glide bait can be deadly. But generally speaking, a glide bait is best fished in the upper portion of the water column. So, not necessarily going to be one of my go-to techniques in really cold water in early spring, but rather the latter half of what we're talking about in early spring. So I'm more likely to throw a bigger soft plastic swim bait when it's cold, and then start throwing a glide bait as it just starts to warm up. All right. Matt, are you hating on the fact that I re-rigged a bait? You said bait gone. Who cares, dude? I don't care. So what? This thing is ripped up, right? A couple of my baits are. I don't care. I got spares. Consider that trashed. Um, and you're right. On the back of a swim jig, they're pretty nice as well. No doubt. Guggen Slayer says, Beast Coast. Yeah, that Miyagi Swimmer is nasty. Really, really good bait. Underrated. I don't know why more people don't talk about it, don't throw it, but I'm also not mad about it. Ron, stop it. He says, be honest, Tyler, the Agent E is on your list in the Morning Dawn. I mean, I love Morning Dawn, but the Agent E, no, man, it's not on my list. Not on my list. Just trying to wake yourself up. All right, I'm going to talk about technique number 5. Okay. We've been on for an hour and 45 minutes. I'm not going to be on much longer tonight. So, number 5 for me in the early spring when water is cold is an underspin. Okay. So this is kind of like a hack around what I was just talking about with Derek, in that a spinnerbait is a classic springtime lure for aggressive fish, but an underspin bridges the gap between, say, um, a finesse swimbait and a spinnerbait. And while we're at it, I do want to mention a finesse swimbait as a great option for early spring fishing as well. Now, you're going to fish these differently, but I wish I had a great one to show you, because I don't have one sitting right here. But what I will tell you is that the type of swim bait that you use on it matters a little bit. There is one that I like to use more than others. On an underspin in the early spring, and that is the Keitech Easy Shiner. Okay. So this guy right here is just on a straight jig head. This is the VMC Boxer head. But the reason that I like the Keitech Easy Shiner is that it is a flat-sided soft plastic swim bait. Not the easiest to rig, but it swims really well. It has a solid medium tail kick to it that is not overly exaggerated. It is not nearly as much as the Keitech Swing Impact Fat or the Keitech Swing Impact, which are both, in my opinion, on more extreme ends of the spectrum. So the Swing Impact Fat is great for really cold water and super slow rolling, or warm water and fishing with that aggressive tail kick. Whereas the Swing Impact is more of a really wide kick, but a super skinny body. So warm water technique, or as a trailer on like a spinnerbait or something like that. Whereas this Easy Shiner, being that flat side, is a really good finesse swim bait on both an underspin and a straight jig head. So really like that bait for early season finesse swim baiting. Also like it on an underspin. Now there's a lot of different baits that you can throw on an underspin. And technically speaking, you can throw anything in the range of 2.8 to 4 inches in size. But I think the sweet spot is really that 3 to 3.5 inch size. If you're throwing a finesse swim bait on just a round ball jig head, or an exposed jig head, whatever the shape of that jig head is, I think it's best to bump bottom. You're going to kill it, let it fall all the way to bottom. You're going to slow roll that thing, ticking the bottom. If you feel that throughout the retrieve you're not making contact with anything, you're reeling it too fast. You need to give line to that bait, let it fall back to bottom until you feel it hit the bottom. Then slow reel until you tick, tick, tick. If you're making too aggressive of contact, if you feel it starting to hang up, if you have to pop it free, if you break off a jig head, you need to fish it just a little bit faster. Okay. So it's going to be slow rolling on bottom, a finesse swim bait. If you're throwing an underspin, I would speed up your retrieve just ever so slightly. Still going to want to swim that thing close to the bottom. Not quite like you would a finesse swim bait, just barely faster. I'm not going to fish it like I would a spinner bait later in the pre-spawn, where I'm going to fish it higher in the water column, fast and pump it. This is not that. You're still slow rolling an underspin low in the water column. So that is my next and really my final addition to this list. Like I said, a spinnerbait and a chatterbait are going to come later in that category of something with flash, something with more vibration, but also to imitate a bait fish that is on the run. So, two other things that I didn't mention. Um, I mentioned the suspending lipless crankbait, but I did not mention the IMA jerkbait that I wanted to. All right, so I'm gonna mention that real quick because I said I was going to, and then I didn't. Let's jump down to that. And this is the IMA. What do they call it? What do they call it? The IMA Flit, FILT. The IMA Flit. As you can see inside this bait, there are triangles. And each one of those triangles holds different BBs that are trapped inside each one of these individual rattle chambers. Do you hear the sound of that rattle? This guy right here bridges the gap between a suspending jerkbait and a lipless crankbait. So, where I said that the IMA suspending vibe bridges the gap between a lipless crankbait and a jerkbait because it's a lipless crankbait that suspends, the IMA Flit is a suspending jerkbait that bridges the gap between jerkbait and lipless crankbait because of its sound. So super, super cool, and something worth noting as you're talking about the differences between lipless crankbaits and jerkbaits, the sounds versus the actions, what they do. You want to keep that in mind, okay? One other thing I did not mention when talking about flat-sided crankbaits is really a whole type of bait that that I do not keep in my flat side box, and that is the Shad Wrap. Okay, a lot of companies make this style of bait, but early in the pre-spawn, a Shad Wrap is such a good bait. So here's a foil wrapped Shad Wrap. This in the 7 size. I mostly prefer to throw like a Shad Wrap 5, but this guy is going to border slash almost exclusively be spinning rod territory. So once you step up to the 7 and the 9, you can throw these guys on bait casting gear. You just really have to have your stuff dialed in. So here's the Shad Wrap in the size 7 in that red crawdad color. I love how this bait is flat, but has a very natural action and a shad profile. So they make it in some craw colors, but they make it in some great shad patterns as well. And I like to throw really all of them. So Helsinki and silver shad, even a chartreuse shad, all great colors. And then likewise, Berkeley makes the flicker shad. So here's the flicker shad shallow. Here's the slightly larger, deeper diving flicker shad. So the flicker shad is made from a hard plastic, whereas the Shad Wrap is made from balsa. But both of those are narrow profile, shad shaped bodied cold water crankbaits. So great for early in the season when fishing for bass, or all year round when fishing for, say, walleye. In fact, most of them are designed to be multi-species baits or trolling style baits for mid-water depths. So in the same situations that I will throw a deeper diving flat-sided crankbait like the KVD 1.5 flat or the Berkeley Fritz side in the size 9, sometimes the 7, I will throw a Shad Wrap in that 9 or 7. Usually the 7, sometimes a 5 if I'm throwing on a spinning rod. But yeah, so that pretty much rounds it out. Um, like I said, I'm not talking about jigs, I'm not talking about shaky heads, drop shots, tubes, um, finesse presentations, but I'm also not talking about more warm water techniques. And I don't even mean warm water, but I mean square bells, chatterbaits, spinner baits, larger swim baits with a more aggressive action. So I wanted to narrow in on techniques and baits that I think really fit that time of year when we're just out of ice out. We're still in the 40s water temperature wise before the pre-spawn has really started to heat up and everything blows out in terms of what you can do to catch fish. Because once we're in the 50s, pushing 60 degrees, as fish are truly in the pre-spawn and moving up, you can catch them on almost anything. So let's be honest about that. Um, Early in the spring, you need to be a bit more picky about how you target bass, how you trigger them to bite. So whether that's a lipless crankbait, hopping up off a bottom, or fishing a little bit quicker and varying your retrieve through the water column, whether that's fishing a flat-sided crank and bumping bottom, letting it float up, letting it swim close to bottom, speeding it up, hitting the bottom, swimming a soft plastic swim bait, low and slow but methodically, or a glide bait higher in the surface, higher in the water column, closer to the surface but slower and methodical, getting fish to rise up to it. Fishing a jerk bait in the middle of the water column to catch suspended fish that are willing to rise to come get a jerk bait that is just acting super erratic, or using an underspin or a finesse swim bait to again fish low and slow close to the bottom, like you would say that flat-sided crankbait. Those are pretty much my picks for early spring cold water bass fishing, and yeah, hope that helps. So let's talk for a couple more minutes, and then I will dip out of here once I finish my bourbon. I've been on for 2 hours and not had to use a thunder mug, Ron Holly. What do you say about that, dude? Daniel says, I want that bait, but instead of little BBs, I want it in a 3-knock. The heck are you talking about? Are you talking about the I'm a flit? And what's a 3-knock, dude? You want a different type of rattle in each one of those chambers? You want more of a knocking sound? It's a weird concept. Derek says, I really enjoyed the stream. Have a fantastic night, my friend. Take care, everyone. Well, dude, cheers. And yeah, thanks for hanging out tonight. Appreciate you. I don't know if you're still in here or not, but really appreciate you hanging out tonight, Derek. Whoops a daisies. Sorry about that. That was ridiculous. Matt says, guys will troll those Magnum Shad Wraps on kayaks for stripers. Here they work really well. Got it. Justin says, what are your guys' go-to colors for most of these baits? Shad colors or red and orange? So again, like I said, I will throw shad colors, natural bait colors early, and when the water is clear. Now, as the water starts to warm up, the fish begin to get more aggressive, and or if the water is really dirty, then I will break out the reds. So I usually go to more of a natural shad pattern before I bust out the reds. But if the water is super dirty straight out of the gate, I will go to reds immediately. Not a problem for me. So it kind of it varies. Ron says must or bust Megabass gong. Dude, I have not tried that bait, but I will say, based on looking at it, it seems like a bust, right? I mean, it's a freaking gorilla with a bill on it. Um, it's a monkey crankbait. Not joking. Seems absolutely absurd. However, the guys at the Hookup Tackle and a few other places have actually talked about that bait like it is a sleeper. So, am I gonna get it? I doubt it. Um, will I get it? Maybe. Am I open to it? Kinda. Sure. Maybe. Um, I don't really like the idea of it, but if more people keep talking it up, I'll probably be convinced. Because why, Ron? Might as well face it. We're all freaking addicted to lures. You know what I mean? Daniel says, yeah, like a one knock sound, but in each chamber. That's what I thought you were talking about. Um, Seems interesting. I don't know. I think the I'm a Flit is cool because it literally sounds like a Rattletrap, but is a suspending jerkbait. But to your point, why not have like a one knocker style of the same bait, since that's what it's trying to do, is make, have the action of a suspending jerkbait, but the sound of a lipless, since really lipless crankbaits come in a rattling and a one knocker version. Why not make a one knocker version of that suspending jerkbait? That's a great point, dude. I don't know. Guggen Slayer says the gong has good action. Yeah, I don't know about that. Um, I also like bigger wake baits, but I don't know about the gong, dude. It's hard to look at a monkey and want to tie it on to let a fish go eat it. Now, a rat, that's a little bit more realistic, right? A bat, even a little bit more realistic. A frog, fine, realistic. But a monkey, what the hell is that? Why why do the Japanese think to do these things? Um, Making Pikachu lures and monkey lures and stuff that literally makes no sense. It's just kind of funny and out there, cool, maybe, but literally even the stupid the beaver, the bucktooth beaver from Berkeley makes more sense than a gong by like a mile, because beavers are in water. How often is a fish like a bass gonna eat a baby monkey? Never. Let alone a micro gorilla. You're right, Ron. You have never caught a bass. You have nothing to lose. Just go ahead and throw the wildest shit. In fact, Ron, I'm gonna send you this beaver. I'm gonna send you a giant Spro rat. I'm gonna send you all of the craziest stuff that I have because you got nothing to lose, right? Let me just send you like 5 lures that I have that are absolutely ridiculous, and maybe you'll catch your very first bass on them. I highly doubt it, and I also don't hope it because I want you to catch your first bass like next month. But dude, we might as well. Let me send you some wild boy stuff. Monkeys and Pikachu is natural forage over there, says Guggenslayer. That's hilarious. I guess kind of. If we're talking Japan, maybe. And Daniel says they're fishing for fishermen instead of fish with the Pokemon lures. No doubt. I mean, really, that's a collector's item more so than an actual fish catching bait. Um, it absolutely meant to catch fishermen and not fish. You're right about that. The Headin' Big Bud is a beer can, and catches fish like crazy. I know multiple people who caught their PB on one. Yeah, now I've seen that bait too. I haven't heard of people catching their PB on it, but I don't doubt it. There's definitely some weird lures out there that do not mimic the real thing. So, um, I don't doubt it. Guggen Slayer says the Pokemon lures will go up in value. Yeah, it's almost like if you took a fishing lure and an NFT and you put them together. That's what you get with a Pokemon lure. Um, it's an interesting concept. It's art combined with lures, something that fishermen may or may not want to invest in the future. Guys, I got to pee right after I talked about it. So I'm going to slam this last, oh, it's about a shot or more. I'm going to chug this and I'm going to dip out of here. I've been out on here for 2 hours and 5 minutes. I talked on the phone for my job today about 6 or 7 hours. I'm losing my voice. You guys have been able to hear it all night. So sorry about that. But let's all take a shot, say cheers, and have a great rest of your night and weekend. Big little gulp there, but guys, thanks for hanging out. Have a great rest of your night. Sleep well tonight. Enjoy your weekend. If I don't see you until next week, be well, and feel free to reach out about anything and everything, whether it's by email, social media. Leave a comment on this video tomorrow after it's posted, just so that it boosts the numbers. I will always reply to those as well. But thank you guys for hanging out. Hit the thumbs up button if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.